Never ever, and I mean never, make these mistakes that I'm about to share with you when it comes to buying land. These are the 15 biggest, most costly mistakes that people make when it comes to purchasing land. So grab a pen and a piece of paper. You're going to want to write these down because I'm going to tell you why, when, how, and how much it will cost you to do these things or to not do these things. My name is Wayne Turner. For nearly 30 years, I have sold thousands of properties, flipped properties, bought investment property, bought land, you name it. The reason why I share this with you is so you can know and have the comfort knowing that the information that I share with you, that the knowledge that we bring to you is actually tried and true, boots on the ground information that come from decades of experience. Okay, before we start, I got a favor to ask. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Doing so gets this information out to that many more people. And secondly, grab a pen and a piece of paper because you're definitely going to want to write this information down. So the first mistake that so many people make is not really knowing the value of the property that they're looking at. Just because you think it's a great deal doesn't mean necessarily it's a great deal. Or just what the seller is asking for the property doesn't mean that it's fair value for the property. Now, to determine the fair value, you can do it in a couple of different ways. One, you need to have an agent pull comparable properties for you. Now, if you're not working with an agent, it's important to have an agent work for you on your behalf. It doesn't cost you anything. The listing broker pays for the agent that you have looking out for your best interest. The second way to determine the value is to actually get an appraisal on the property. Now, that will run you around $400 to do so, and you do that after you've contracted the property. Now, if you're getting a loan on the property, the lender or the bank is going to require that you actually have the property appraised. If you're paying cash, you don't necessarily have to have the property appraised because most people don't realize that real estate agents subscribe to and have access to the same comparable closed data as real estate appraisers. Now, when I say comparable closed data, that basically means that they look for properties that have sold within a 3-mile radius of the property that you're looking to purchase, and they've closed in the last 6 months. The most comparable property, and that's how they use the comparison approach to show you the actual value of the land that you're purchasing. So the second mistake that people make is not physically walking the property. Never buy a property sight unseen. I wouldn't advise it. You can do it, I just wouldn't do it personally. But get out and walk the property. And listen, when you walk the property, you want to make sure that you have bug spray on, you've got long pants on. Last thing you want to do is be taking a bath in bleach because you're covered in chiggers. And also, it's not a bad idea to actually have personal protection. Listen, between bears, coyotes, snakes, bobcats, mountain lions, you name it, it's not a bad idea to have something of personal protection. So walk the property, but listen, don't just walk the property one time. Walk the property if you can after or during a rain. So not just after it's been dry, but after it's been wet to see if there's any low spots, any spots holding water on the property, so you can get that taken care of before you actually make the purchase on the property. Now the third mistake that people make is not getting a survey. When you buy a piece of property, you want to make sure you have a survey. And the survey is going to show you where the property ends and where it begins. What are the meets and bounds of the property? Oftentimes a seller has a survey. And when a survey is done, it's recorded in your city, county, parish, courthouse, registered of deeds office, if you will. You'll want to make sure that that information is recorded and you have a copy of that. Now, if you don't have a newer survey, you may want to pay for a newer survey. And it will run you anywhere from $600 to upwards of thousands of dollars. It really just depends on the typography of the land, the size of the land, and how much property the actual surveyors have to trek through. But by all means, make sure you know exactly where the property starts, begins, and ends before you sign on the dotted line. Number 4, and this is something that's so simple and it's free, and that's to get out there and talk to the neighbors. Ask the neighbors what they think about the property, what they think about the other neighbors. Are there any noises, nuisances? Is there anything that would prevent them from buying the property that they currently own? Have they thought about selling their property? Would they buy their property again? How long have they lived there? Anything that you ask them, they are a wealth of information for you when it comes to making that initial purchase on that land. Now, number 5 is important to a lot of people, and it's electricity. You got to make sure there's electricity that's available on the property. Now, some people are like, Wayne, I just want to live off the grid. I don't care, dude. I don't need electricity. I just want privacy. I want to live way off the grid. However, if you want to purchase a piece of property, actually build a home on, you're going to need and want electricity. And if you're going to build a property, let's say you buy 20 acres of land, and that land that you purchased and where you want to put the house on that land is 3,000 feet off the road, and that's where the electricity is, you have to know that it will cost you thousands of dollars just to get to electricity to your house. Now, number 6 is knowing whether or not the property that you're going to purchase is in a flood zone, or if it's on a wetlands. Oftentimes, if it's got a creek on the property, a portion of that property may be in a flood zone. So it really just varies. Now, there's different flood zones. There's A, B, C, and X flood zones. Now, if you're in like an AE flood zone, your flood insurance is going to be higher. So it starts with A, the most expensive, then it goes to B, then C, and then X. Listen, if you're going to get a loan or a mortgage on a property, or you're going to build on that property that you're purchasing, it's really, really, really important to know that if you're in flood zone A, you're going to have flood insurance. The mortgage company will require that you have flood insurance on that property. And it can be upwards of thousands of dollars, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, literally just for flood insurance. That's not homeowner's insurance. And that's to make sure that if your property floods, it's going to be covered, and it's required by the lender, because if they're going to loan you money on that property, they want to make sure that their asset is covered in case it floods. Now, how you determine what the flood zone is and whether or not it's in a wetlands area is you have to look up the property flood zone. You have to look up Corps of Engineers, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of Googling. You can typically go to the college university in your state and type in LSU, for example, flood map, and it will pull up the flood map, and you can actually see, based on the topography and demographic area of the land, where the property resides and the flood zone that it's in. Now, the other thing to do is to get a flood elevation certificate. You can do that. It's pretty inexpensive. It's less than $1,000 typically to get a flood elevation certificate. Also, the survey, not always, but most of the time, the survey will show you the actual flood zone of the property. Now, number 7 is restrictions, and that's a real important one. Don't make the mistake of buying a piece of property without knowing the restrictive covenants, the deed restrictions, if you will, of that property. Listen, the deed restrictions are going to tell you what you can and cannot do on that property. And typically, it can be handed down from decades, generations from previous homeowners. Now, they may say that you can have horses, but you can't have pigs and chickens. You can have pigs and chickens, but you can't have horses. It's crazy, I know. But it's hard to get that stuff changed, because the person selling you the property, that's already recorded and pretty much set in stone. Now, you also need to know that whenever you're buying a piece of property, there's restrictions to the property of what you actually can build on that property. So a lot of times people say, well, Wayne, I'm just going to put a single wide mobile home, or I'm going to do a motor home for 6 months. I'm going to live in that, and then I'm going to build my house and I'm going to sell it. But if the restrictive covenants, the deed restrictions, say that you can't do that, well, then you can't do that. So you need to make sure that you always get the deed restrictions of the property that you're going to purchase, and you look over it with a fine-tooth comb. You read it 3 times with a highlighter, and make sure that what you want to do with the property that you're about to purchase, you can actually do it. Now, number 8, and people don't realize how important this is, and that's a title policy. You want to make sure you have a title policy on the property. The title policy basically covers the property from the time that you own it and previous owners back, decades back. So that means that no one's going to come walking on your property and say, hey, Wayne, I just put a fence up on this property. I just put a septic system on this property. I just ran utility lines on this property. You owe me money. It's like, no, no, no. I got a title policy. They did the research for me. I paid for that title policy. And that means that if you've got an issue, you have to take it up with the previous owner. Nobody can come claiming your land or put any kind of liens or anything on that land. The title policy is going to check for back taxes, liens, encumbrances, mechanical liens, everything. So you have peace of mind knowing that once you've closed on the property, it's said and done, and you're good to go. Now, the cost of the title policy is not all that bad. It can range anywhere from $600, $700 to thousands of dollars. It really just depends on the value of the actual land and what you're paying for the land. You see, when they pull and do a title policy, they look at that and charge you based on a percentage. So it's anywhere from $700, $800 to $3,000 or $4,000 if you get into a piece of property that you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on. But trust me, it's worth every cent. Now, number 9, and here's a good one, and this one people miss a lot, and it's land leases. You have to know that when you purchase a piece of property, and listen, when you do all of this research, you're doing it during your due diligence period. You're doing it during the time frame, typically 10 to 15 days after you've put a property under contract. But you have to know, are there any land leases on the property? If you're buying 20, 30, 50, 100 plus acres of land, you have to know that the seller selling you the property isn't obligated to land leases over the next 5, 6, 10, 12 years. Quick story, a lot of people don't realize that Walgreens, for example, Walgreens, they don't own their property, they lease all the property. McDonald's, on the other hand, McDonald's is the largest real estate company actually in the world. They own every piece of land that a McDonald's is on. So you just want to make sure that whether you're buying commercial property or residential property, are there any land leases that would prevent you from doing what you want to do on your property? Now, number 10 is actually the septic system. Can you connect to the city sewer, or can you put a septic system on the property? So here's what happens. If you purchase a piece of property and you want to put a septic system in, you have to make sure that that property can actually percolate the septic system itself. So what they do is your county, your parish has to come out and drill holes literally into the ground, and they have to make sure that water will absorb into the earth, water will absorb into that ground. Now, if it's real rocky soil, very much clay soil, and it won't absorb fast enough, they won't allow it to be perked. And if it won't allow it to be perked, well then you can't put a home on that property with a septic system. So it's so important to know that will the property perk, get the property perked, and do that during your due diligence period. Now, here's the big thing that people miss. You want to make sure that you get the property perked for a 4-bedroom. Minimum 4-bedroom. I don't care if you want to put a 2-bedroom on it or a 3-bedroom on it, because what happens is this: they don't go off bathrooms, they actually go off bedrooms. And so what they're going to look at is how many bedrooms do you want to put in the house. If you say 2, they're only going to perk it for a 2-bedroom. So if you have a larger piece of property and that you convert one of those rooms to another bedroom, and then you go to sell the property and you're selling the property 3, 5, 10 years down the road, and your property's now a 3-bedroom but it only perked for 2, that's a hard one to change, because now they're saying, well, you're only a 2-bedroom house, we can't give you a clear letter to be able to sell that property. Don't get tied up in that. Always, always tell them that you need that land to perk for a 4-bedroom house. Now, number 11 is something that's missed, and some people, they don't mind this at all. It's not any big of a deal, but there's this thing called fracking, and it's where they drill down into the earth to find natural gas. In doing so, a lot of people don't want to be around that. So if you're in a half a mile, 5-mile radius of where they're actually drilling way down into the earth and injecting the earth with water to try to find natural gas, that may not be something that you're okay with. So you need to make sure that they're not fracking anywhere on the property. And basically, to do that, you just have to do your research. You have to ask neighbors, you have to ask your agent, you have to ask the surveyor, you have to Google the property, Google fracking around you in your county, in your parish, to make sure that, now keep in mind too, the seller is supposed to disclose those things, but oftentimes the seller themselves, they don't know. Now, number 12, and this one's a big one, and that's water. You gotta have water on the property. Is there water on the property? If there's not water on the property, then you gotta make sure you can actually dig a well on the property. Now, digging a well on the property is pretty simple. However, it can be more expensive than you think. If there's a whole lot of rock where you're trying to dig for a well, then they're gonna have to dig through literally hundreds of feet of rock, and doing so is gonna make it real expensive to put a well in. So you have to make sure, are you on city water? If not, can you put a well? Can you get a permit to put a well? And how rocky is that soil? Now, you can do your research and find out, is there a lot of rock in that soil? But most importantly, you just want to make sure that you can, in fact, drill a well on that property. So once you close on it, it's your land, you can have water. Now, number 13 is zoning. So you may buy a piece of property in an area that's real close to a little small town, for example. Like maybe it's close to Covington, Louisiana, or maybe it's in Charleston, South Carolina. Maybe it's somewhere where it's in this quiet, quaint little town, and you stumbled upon 4, 5, 6 acres of land. You have to know that that property is not in an area that's highly zoned. In other words, it's not in a historical area that will prevent you from building the type of home that you want to build on the property. So always know, is the zoning, is it commercial, is it residential, is it multifamily? What is the actual zoning of the property? That can make or break whether or not you can build what you want to build, and most importantly, it can cost you a whole lot of money if it's zoned in an area that you thought otherwise. Now, this one people often miss. It doesn't cost you any money, and that's manufacturing. You have to know what is within a 3 to 5, 7 mile radius of that property that you're looking to purchase. And I know I say property a lot. We're talking about property. That's okay. Make it a drinking game, somebody said. So here's the deal. You're walking the property, you're out on the property, and it's on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Great, right? Wind's blowing, beautiful day. You write the contract, get it agreed upon. But here's why you do your due diligence. You need to make sure that there's no manufacturing facility where they're literally making food for a restaurant. True story. I've had this happen where people said, I don't want that piece of property because when I went back on a Wednesday, it smelled like food the whole time. Literally, we were within 2 miles of a manufacturing plant of food, literally, for a restaurant. They didn't want the property. Also, you have to look at manufacturing. What if there's a manufacturing plant? It may be loud if you're real close. It may not be that it's loud, but it may put off an odor. For example, if you're around somewhere where they literally make gasoline, you're gonna smell gasoline. If you're around somewhere where they literally make cardboard boxes or paper, you're around a paper mill, well, you're gonna smell that pulp, and it's not as pleasant as you might think. Now, number 15 is mineral rights. And listen, a lot of these are missed. And that's why we do the video, so you can make the list and make sure that you check everything off when it comes to purchasing your property. Because the last thing you want to do is purchase a property and the seller keep the mineral rights. That means that they can now have somebody come up on the land that they just sold you, the land that you just bought, and they can do fracking, as I mentioned earlier. They can frack for natural gas. They'll make injections into the earth and try to find natural gas, and they've got a whole crew out there, right? Or they're looking for oil. They'll be digging for oil on your property. And if they strike oil, guess who gets no money? You. So whatever you do, when you purchase a piece of property, make sure that you get the mineral rights. And so listen, I hope you've written all this information down. If you have any questions, you can go to contactwayne.com. We post all of these videos. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. Share it with someone that you think would be of benefit to these many videos. And once again, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.